welcome back. So we've finally finished the stripy challenge shoe. I hope you enjoyed seeing the process behind the scenes. It was such a challenge, honestly. I knew going into it that it was gonna be a difficult shoe to make, and frankly I was a little bit out of practice when I first got into it, but I seized the opportunity to join in on the challenge, and I kind of figured I would be able to at least learn something, and I definitely did. This one, however, I did specify in one of the videos before, and I'm sure I mentioned it on Instagram as well. This one shoe, I made a single left shoe for the reason that I had never made a heel before, and structurally it's completely different to the other kinds of shoes that I have been making. I wanted to try to make one without the expectation of having to bear any weight, my weight basically. Also because considering all the different techniques that I was already implementing here that I've never made before, I was giving myself a break as well, in the sense that I didn't have to make two shoes, because the process already took a very long time, so imagine that times two, right? So it's definitely, I think, a lot better that I went with just the left shoe, and I'm super thrilled with the outcome, and I think it's gonna be so cool to have it on my shelf as a display. Anybody that comes to my studio will be able to see it, so I'm really excited about that. So let's start with successes. I definitely feel like the actual finished shoe is a success, in the sense that by no means is it perfect, but I feel like I've accomplished a lot for myself and my own abilities, and sort of proven to myself that I can make something like this, and I'll only keep going until I can make it better. I learned that the leather, when it wiggles, I was able to figure something out and basically use masking tape as the backing on it for cutting all the bits. This is one of the ones that I didn't end up using, but as you'll see, like it ended up being quite clean, the actual cuts. And that's because I put masking tape on the back. So that's something that I learned the second time around, not the first one. The first one that I cut, all of these individual little strips ended up getting like all stretched out because I went in and skived each of the edges. So the first one that I made, I actually started by using the same type of leather, but in the black. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's not the thinnest leather ever. So when I backed it, it looked really nice, but when I went to go try to shape it and last it and stitch it and all the things, it wasn't very easy. The second time around, I actually ended up going with this. I had in my stash, I think it's goat. I'm not sure if it's goat or sheep, but it was this very thin leather. Because it was so much thinner, it made the stitching a lot better, and it made the process just overall easier in the thickness sense. There was a fault to it as well, but I think the pattern was a success. I think the actual designing of each line was a success. I'm really happy with the outcome of the design on the shoe. I think it looks pretty similar to the original 1925 shoe, so that I'm very proud of. The other thing is the heel. I ended up wrapping the heel, as you'll see, and placing the strips. I think I approached this a little bit differently than it should be technically. I think once you make the pattern for the shoe, you make the pattern for the heel out of paper, and then you create it out of leather. In this case, because I wanted to match up all the lines, I wrapped it in the dark leather, and then I, with like a white pencil, made lines to where I should go ahead and place the white bits. I think that was pretty successful as well. I didn't, however, stitch it afterwards, but I felt like maybe I could just give myself a break on that this time around. And also, you know, the sole. I normally attach the sole as a bigger piece and then trim it and sand it, which is very fiddly because you can cut the uppers, which I've done too many times. But I have found that, you know, when it's a bit more forgiving because you're putting the leather piece bigger, and then the placement of the shoe doesn't really matter that much, and then you go ahead and trim it. In this time around, because it was black and white, and I feel like you would have been able to notice more issues in it, and then having to paint it afterwards would have been too too much. So I wanted to practice what is normally done, which was you pre-shape the sole, you sand it, you do all of it, you polish it, everything, and then you glue it on. So I did that. I think it came out pretty successfully. There are things I think I need to work on, but overall I'm really happy with the outcome of that as well. As for failures, as I mentioned, the dark leather was great because it was thin, but in the lasting process I actually ripped a piece, which you probably can't see because I like did surgery so that it wouldn't be noticeable, but it happened. So it's something to keep in mind for pairs of shoes, for myself or anybody else moving forward. That's something to consider with that leather. The stitching, as you might remember from my last video, was an experience. Stitching was really hard actually, because you have to follow all the little curves and the sewing machine kind of doesn't want to do that. So the first time around I did it in my post-bed leather sewing machine. The second time around I cheated and I did it in my like brother garment sewing machine. It was considerably easier. It was because it's flat, and which leads me to want to create like a flatbed for this post machine, but that's a whole other topic. In this case I was able to maneuver it a little bit better. There's definitely still issues, there's still definitely not perfect, but it was considerably better. So that was something that I learned with the stitching, so definitely need more practice in that department. I mean, again, it's very curvy. To follow that curve and to keep it at like a very nice like 1 millimeter away from the edge was very, very hard. There's one failure that is very sad that I guess is not technically my failure, but I made this shoe also for the first time on this last. And it was my first time testing it out. I've never made anything on this before. The factory sent me this based on my measurements, as in based on my measurements, right? It doesn't fit. It looks like it fits in the picture, but if I actually put it on and like, you know, when you wear heels, your body sort of moves forward a little bit, so your foot in a sense maybe shrinks a little bit. I guess that's the technical term. So in essence, this size 7, my foot fits like right here, so there's like a good like centimeter extra of material. But I think I'm going to maybe try my hand at shaving this down for the upcoming shoes. The boots though, I did already make them based on this, so the boots are probably gonna be a bit big on me. That's a failure for sure. Another failure is that, remember in the last video how I talked about these cuts and how potentially I was gonna have to make them longer? Yes, I definitely need to make them longer. I didn't account for the insole. Like, what was I thinking? The insole was like at least 5 millimeters, which I didn't account for. So after I lasted the shoe, I actually had to go in and like trim it. It was a whole thing. So definitely from now on, stretch this longer. I wouldn't say all the way, because maybe I feel like the integrity of the leather, again with the ripping issue, when you're lasting it, if the thinner leather is left by itself, it might cause an issue. But definitely make it longer. And obviously the stitching needs to be longer. I didn't do the stitching long enough, so realistically when it wraps around, there are some bits that, like, if you look really closely, the stitching ends right before the sole, which isn't ideal. But that's something else to keep in mind for myself and you if you decide to make this shoe as well. I feel like that's pretty much the whole of it. Like I said, it wasn't a great amount of successes and failures, but overall, I'm really thrilled with the outcome of the shoe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe. We do really fun things here, mostly talk about vintage shoes. So if you like vintage shoes and you want to see me recreate more stuff, which I will, subscribe and like and the bell and all the things. See you next time.